The silence in a courtroom is usually a sign of respect. It is the sound of people listening, learning, and reflecting. But sometimes the silence is different. Sometimes it is the sound of a room collectively holding its breath because someone has just crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. On a rainy Tuesday in November, Preston Thorne crossed that line. Preston was 24 years old, but his eyes looked older, cold, calculating, and entirely devoid of warmth. He was the heir to the Thorne pharmaceutical legacy, a company known less for its cures and more for its price hikes. He stood at the podium not like a defendant, but like a CEO conducting a hostile takeover. His suit was Italian silk, a shade of gray that probably had its own trademark. On his wrist sat a platinum watch that cost more than the entire courthouse building. He didn't look at the clerk. He didn't look at the bailiff. He looked at Judge Frank Caprio with an expression of mild amusement, as if the proceedings were a quaint local play he was forced to endure. "Mr. Thorne," Judge Caprio began, his voice steady and calm, "you are here today on a citation for obstructing an emergency access lane at Rhode Island Hospital. The report states that your vehicle, a Lamborghini Aventador, was parked directly in front of the dialysis center entrance for 45 minutes. Preston sighed. He checked his cuticles. "It wasn't 45 minutes, Judge. It was 20. I was picking up a prescription. My driver was indisposed." "The time is irrelevant," Caprio said, looking over his glasses. "The location is the issue. That lane is for ambulances. It is for elderly patients in wheelchairs who need life-saving treatment. When you parked there, 2 transport vans were forced to unload patients in the rain, 50 yards away. And I'm sure they survived," Preston said, finally looking up. His voice was smooth, polished, and terrifyingly indifferent. "Look, let's cut to the chase. I understand the city needs revenue. That's why we're here, right? It's a transaction. You charge me a fee for the luxury of parking where I want. I pay the fee, and we both get on with our day." The judge stopped shuffling the papers. He placed his hands flat on the bench. "You think this is about revenue?" Caprio asked softly. "Everything is about revenue." Preston smirked. "That's how the world works. My family's company supplies the drugs that keep half the people in this room alive. We understand the cost of doing business. If I inconvenienced a few people, well, that's just the price of efficiency," the gallery murmured. A woman in the back row, wearing a nurse's uniform, shook her head in disgust. "Mr. Thorne," Caprio said, "the people you inconvenienced are not line items on a spreadsheet. They are human beings. Mrs. Gallo, who is 82, had to be pushed through a puddle because your car was blocking the ramp. She was soaked. She was shivering during her treatment. Does that mean anything to you?" Preston shrugged. "I can send her a blanket. A nice one. Cashmere." He reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a checkbook. It was leather-bound, sleek. He uncapped a gold fountain pen. "What's the maximum fine?" Preston asked, hovering the pen over the paper. 500? 1,000? Tell you what, I'll write it for 10,000. Consider the difference a donation to the policeman's ball, or whatever you people do." "Put the pen away," Caprio ordered. "Why?" Preston laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "It clears, I assure you. Thorne Pharmaceuticals has never bounced a check. This court is not for sale," Caprio said, his voice rising just enough to cut through the young man's arrogance. "And neither is your conscience, apparently, because you seem to have sold it long ago." Preston's smile faded. He didn't like being told what to do. He wasn't used to it. In his world, money was a master key. It opened every door, silenced every critic, and smoothed over every mistake. To find a door that wouldn't open was baffling to him. "You're making a mistake," Preston said, his tone sharpening. "You're treating me like a criminal. I am a job creator. My family pays more taxes in a month than you will earn in your entire life." "And yet," Caprio countered, "you cannot follow a simple sign that says emergency vehicles only. Perhaps all that money has blinded you to the basic rules of civility. Civility is for people who have to wait in line," Preston snapped. He was getting angry now. The mask of corporate cool was slipping. "I don't wait in lines. I don't look for parking spots. I am a Thorne. Do you know what that means in this state? It means you have a responsibility, Caprio said. A responsibility you are failing. Preston slammed the checkbook onto the podium. The sound echoed like a gunshot. I am trying to help you, Preston shouted. I am trying to give you money. Take it. Fix the potholes. Buy a new robe. Why are you being so difficult? Because, Caprio said, leaning forward, justice is not a transaction. It is a standard, and today you are falling below that standard. Preston stared at the judge. His face turned a shade of crimson. He felt small. He hated feeling small. He needed to reassert dominance. He needed to remind this old man in a black robe who held the real power. He leaned into the microphone. He lowered his voice to a menacing hiss. Judge, Preston said, pointing a manicured finger at the bench. Let's be real. I could buy your retirement. I could write a check right now that would let you fly to Florida and never listen to another sob story again. I could buy this whole room. The air left the courtroom. The audacity hung in the space between them. It was a naked attempt at bribery, wrapped in an insult, delivered with the confidence of a king addressing a peasant. Everyone looked at Caprio. The bailiff stepped forward, hand on his belt. The clerk stopped typing. Judge Caprio didn't blink. He didn't flinch. He looked at the young heir with a gaze that was not angry, but profoundly disappointed. He waited for the echo of the young man's words to die out. Then, he leaned into his own microphone. He spoke 8 words that cut through the billions of dollars, the Italian silk, and the pharmaceutical empire. I am rich in ways you are poor. The room went dead silent. Preston blinked. He opened his mouth to retort, to throw another number, another threat. But the words died in his throat. You are poor, Caprio continued, his voice gentle but unyielding. In spirit. You are poor in empathy. You are poor in character. You have a bank account that is full, but a soul that is empty. And that is a poverty that no check can cure. Preston stood there, frozen. The logic of his world, that every man has a price, had just shattered against the rock of a man who wanted nothing from him but decency. You offer to buy my retirement, Caprio said, shaking his head. But my retirement is not for sale. My integrity is not for sale. And the dignity of this court is certainly not for sale to the highest bidder. I stammered. I didn't. You did, Caprio interrupted. You tried to commodify justice, and that is a far greater offense than parking in an ambulance zone. The judge opened the docket file. He picked up his pen. But this time he wasn't writing a fine. He was writing a prescription of his own. You said you wanted to make a donation, Caprio said. You wanted to write a check for $10,000. I will, Preston said quickly, sensing a way out. I'll write it now. No, Caprio said. You will not write a check. You will not hide behind your money. I am going to impose a fine of $500. That is the statutory maximum for the parking violation. Preston looked confused. 500? That's it? I have that in my pocket. I'm not finished, Caprio said. The steel entered his voice again. In addition to the fine, I am ordering you to complete 100 hours of community service. Community service? Preston recoiled, as if the judge had suggested he eat from a dumpster. I don't do manual labor. I have people for that. You don't have people for this, Caprio said, because I am assigning you personally. And I am not sending you to pick up trash in a park. I am sending you to the place you disrespected. The judge looked at the clerk. Assign Mr. Thorne to the Rhode Island Hospital Volunteer Transport Unit. Preston's eyes went wide. The hospital? You want me to work at the hospital? Specifically, Caprio said, I want you to work in the wheelchair transport division. You are going to push the patients. You are going to push the elderly. You are going to push the people who are sick, who are scared, and who are cold. You are going to push Mrs. Gallo, Caprio added. And every time you push a wheelchair, up that ramp, the very same ramp you blocked with your Lamborghini, you are going to remember why that space needs to be clear. I can't do that, Preston protested. I have a board meeting next week. I have a gala in London. Cancel them, Caprio said, or bring your toothbrush, Because the alternative to this service is 30 days in the adult correctional institution for attempted bribery of a judicial official and contempt of court. The choice is yours. The boardroom or the broom closet? Preston looked at the bailiff, who was now standing directly behind him, looking very eager to escort him to a cell. He looked at the judge, whose face was set in stone. The reality of the situation finally breached the fortress of his ego. He was not in control. "I'll do the service," Preston whispered. "Speak up," Caprio commanded. "I will do the service," Preston said, his voice cracking. "Good," Caprio said. "You have 30 days to complete the first 50 hours. I want a report from the supervisor. If you are late once, if you are rude to a single patient, if you try to pay someone to push those chairs for you, you will serve the time. Do we understand each other?" "Yes, Your Honor." "One more thing," Caprio said, leaning back. "You mentioned my retirement. When I do retire, I will look back on a life spent trying to help people. When you look back on yours, Mr. Thorne, what will you see? A high score in a bank account? Or a life that actually mattered?" Preston didn't answer. He couldn't. He picked up his checkbook, which suddenly felt very heavy, and slid it into his pocket. "Get out of my sight," Caprio said. "Next case." Preston Thorne walked out of the courtroom. He didn't strut. He didn't check his watch. He walked with the uneven gait of a man who has just had his entire worldview dismantled. The screen fades to black. Text appears. 3 weeks later. The scene opens on a bustling hospital corridor. It smells of antiseptic and floor wax. We see a pair of hands gripping the rubber handles of a wheelchair. The hands are not manicured anymore. The knuckles are white with effort. The camera pans up. It is Preston. He is wearing a blue volunteer vest over a plain white t-shirt. He looks tired. There are dark circles under his eyes. He isn't checking a platinum watch. He is checking a clipboard. "Okay, Mrs. Gallo," Preston says. His voice is different. It is softer. "We're almost at the car. The heater is on, just like you like it." In the wheelchair sits the same elderly woman mentioned in court. She looks up at him. "Thank you, dear. You're a good boy." Preston flinches slightly at the compliment. A good boy. No one had called him that in years. They called him Sir, or Boss, or Mr. Thorne. But never good. He pushes her through the automatic doors. It is raining again. He stops the chair under the awning. He sees a luxury sedan parked in the loading zone, blocking the way. A driver in a suit is leaning against it, smoking a cigarette. Preston stares at the car. It's a Mercedes. It looks exactly like the kind of car he used to drive. Preston feels a surge of anger. Not the entitled anger of a rich kid, but the righteous anger of a protector. "Hey!" Preston shouts. The driver looks up, annoyed. "What?" "You can't park there," Preston says, stepping out into the rain. "This is for patients. Move it." The driver laughs. "Relax, kid. I'm waiting for a VIP. I'll move when I'm ready." "No," Preston says, his voice firm. He points to the sign. "You will move it now, because she is freezing, and she matters more than your VIP." The driver looks at Preston. He looks at the vest. He looks at the fire in the young man's eyes. There is something there that makes the driver nervous. It isn't the threat of money. It is the threat of moral authority. All right, the driver mutters, getting into the car. "Keep your shirt on." The Mercedes pulls away. Preston watches it go. He takes a deep breath of the cold, wet air. It tastes better than the air in any boardroom. He turns back to the wheelchair. "Okay, Mrs. Gallo, the road is clear." The scene dissolves back to the courtroom. It is the 30-day review. Preston stands at the podium. The Italian suit is back, but he wears it differently. He doesn't lean. He stands straight. "Mr. Thorne," Judge Caprio says, holding a report. "I have a letter here from the director of volunteers at Rhode Island Hospital." Preston nods, bracing himself. "The letter," Caprio continued, peering over his reading glasses, "says that you have completed 120 hours of service." Preston blinked. "I lost count, Your Honor." "It also says," Caprio read, a hint of a smile touching his lips, "that you personally purchased 20 waterproof blankets for the transport unit, and that you refused to be reimbursed." The courtroom went quiet. This was the same man who, a month ago, thought writing a check was a way to dismiss human suffering. Now, he was using his money to alleviate it, anonymously. "Why did you do that, Preston?" Caprio asked gently. Preston shifted his weight. He looked at his hands that now knew the vibration of a wheelchair on asphalt, hands that had held doors open for people who couldn't hold them for themselves. "Because it was cold," Preston said simply, "and because Mrs. Gallo was shivering. I realized that my car has a heated seat, but she didn't even have a blanket. It didn't make sense anymore." The judge took off his glasses. He looked at the young man, really looked at him. Caprio said, his voice warm and resonant. "When you stood there 4 weeks ago, you told me you were rich. You told me you could buy this room. Do you remember?" Preston looked down, ashamed. "I remember. I was wrong." "No," Caprio corrected him. "You were just using the wrong currency. Today, looking at this report, looking at the extra hours you put in, I can finally say it." The judge smiled, a genuine grandfatherly smile that lit up the bench. "Mr. Thorne, you are finally a wealthy man." Preston looked up, his eyes shining with a sudden, unexpected emotion. It wasn't pride. It was gratitude. For the first time in his life, he felt rich in a way that had nothing to do with the stock market. "Thank you, Judge," Preston whispered. "Case dismissed," Caprio announced, banging the gavel. "Go on, and Preston?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Keep the vest. It suits you better than the Italian silk." Preston smiled. A real smile, one that reached his eyes. He nodded, turned, and walked down the aisle. He walked past the gallery, past the nurse who had shaken her head at him weeks ago. This time she nodded at him. He nodded back. He walked out of the heavy oak doors, not as an heir to a pharmaceutical empire, but as a member of the human race. And as he stepped out into the provident sunlight, he didn't call his driver. He checked his watch, not to see if he was late for a gala, but to see if he had time to get back to the hospital for the afternoon shift. Because Preston Thorne had learned the most expensive lesson of his life for free. The only things worth having are the things you cannot buy. If you believe that character is the only true currency, and that no one is too rich to learn a lesson in humility, hit that subscribe button. Join us next time on Caprio Justice. Till then, stay humble and help each other home.